Welcome, everybody. This is the Rotary E-Club of Silicon Valley. Each week, we bring interesting folks to you to learn about all kinds of cool things related to our interests of innovation, entrepreneurship, and education, especially as they relate to humanitarian service. And this week, we have a friend of mine, Steve McGriff, who is going to talk to us about creative confidence. And I will pass it over to him to get this going. So welcome, Steve. It is a pleasure to have you here.
Thank you, Rushton. I'm glad to join you and be able to participate. I'm going to share my screen so you can see this presentation. And Rushton, I'm going to rely on you to give me the heads up that it went through the way we expect it to.
Looks good.
All right, then. Well, it's always important to have a little warm-up activity. So if we're going to talk about creativity and creative confidence, let's get into it. So I'm going to adjust my monitor so that you can see what I'm about to do. So my head's going to disappear a little bit, but this is what I'd like you to do. I'd like you to cross your arms. And I'd like you to just rest into your shoulders. Have your arms crossed and get it comfortable. Now, switch the arm that's on top. Cross them in the other orientation. And can you do that? And can you rest there comfortably and make that work? Or do you feel like you really have to put it back the way that it was? It's very interesting how we get comfortable with a certain way that we cross our arms. In fact, it'll even work with your hands. If you clasp your hands, take a close look. Which thumb is on top? Now cause yourself a little dissonance and make the other thumb go on top. Clasp your hands with the opposite thumb on top. I can imagine that you'll want to quickly just move it back to the way that it was. That's an easy way to introduce an idea about creativity, because it is in that dissonance, it is in that discomfort that we become most creative. It's when our routines are disruptive that we figure out, I've got to solve this problem. This is really bothersome to me. And our brain gets stimulated into thinking of ways, I got to fix this. I got to get my arms back the way that really feels comfortable to me, or I got to get my thumbs back in the right direction, as if there is a right direction or a wrong direction, when in fact, there really isn't. It's just a matter of comfort. Now, I'm an educator. And as an educator of teachers, I have the privilege of working with them and trying to draw them out of their comfort zones. I need to know what their comfort zones are so that I would know what it is that I'm disrupting. It's the disruption that causes them to think a little bit more creatively and a little bit differently about what they've been doing. You've probably had the experience of talking with teachers who will tell you that they've been teaching for 10, 15, 20 years. For many of those teachers, they haven't changed much of what they've been teaching in that particular period of time. Many of our teachers are not exploring the creative endeavors or creative possibilities of what it would mean to integrate technologies or creative thinking into their curriculum. Even those who teach STEM, even those who teach STEM or engineering, mathematics courses, where they know that their students can use that kind of skill and knowledge as they go out into the workforce, particularly here in Silicon Valley. So as a disruptor of such things, I keep trying to figure out, how do I get these teachers to think differently about what they're doing? And the whole idea of trying something new or creative or innovative is uncomfortable to them, which is the very nature of what creativity and creative confidence is seeking to do. If I even mention the concept of creativity, many of these teachers will look at me and say, I'm not sure about that. That's reserved for the artsy teachers, or that's reserved for those teachers who like using technology. There's always some deflective reason why they are not the creative teachers. And that's really too bad, because it's through that creative endeavor that students tend to come alive and see their schoolwork and their time in school as really something special. Even the teachers who teach in the sciences understand that innovation comes from a lot of creativity. But they will often answer me with a reply like this. They're just not feeling very creative. Oops, too many slides. The I'm not creative response is really a response of fear and concern that they're about to hit into their uncomfortable zone. So they didn't have the advantage of taking creativity 101 in high school. Well, neither did I. But creativity is inherent. It's built into us in who we are. The power of innovation and creativity was explored in a poll that Adobe Systems did a few years ago. The wonderful thing that I found about this poll was a lot of people, 5,000 people from around the world. And 80% of those people who responded to that poll felt that unlocking creative potential was really critical to economic growth. Now, for a company like Adobe Systems, representative of Silicon Valley, representative of innovations that we use and experience every day, no one would say Adobe is a non-creative company. They thrive on creativity. And yet, here's some answers they got back in their poll. 25% of the people who felt that creative potential was critical felt like they were living up to their creative potential. Well, that's a quarter. That's really pretty good until you look at the part that's missing. It's the other 75% who think creative potential is critical. That 75% doesn't feel that they're living up to their creative potential. And maybe what's missing right there is their own creative confidence. I want to talk a little bit more about that. Inherently, you are creative. You being born and the fact that you as an infant didn't know anything and figured out how to survive demonstrates that inherently you are creative in getting a response to crying, throwing things as we often did as infants and toddlers, looking for reactions. And we're learning from that. That would tell me that from the get-go, we've got creativity built inside of us. Well, two creativity masterminds, David Kelly and Tom Kelly, who are brothers, they have a life mission to promote creative confidence. They've written a book called Creative Confidence, Unleashing the Creative Potential Within All of Us. What you should know about David Kelly is he's the founder of the D School at Stanford University. Before that, he was just simply a mechanical engineering professor in the product design division. I had the privilege of taking a course from him. Learned a lot about creative thinking and creative expression through sketching and through ideation and through building projects like I have never seen or done before in my life. Fantastic experience. These two men now have this in a book, built on the 30, 40 plus years of them working with adults and students of all ages from all kinds of academic disciplines to help stimulate their creative thinking for problems in their specific disciplines. What they found is that the difference between those who we would say are innovators and the rest of us comes down to something as simple as this: believing in your creative ability to create change in the world around you. I had a fantastic experience with this. I was challenged to build a three-shelf shelving unit out of pallets and 2x4s. I had only pallets and 2x4s. I had to figure out what are the fasteners, what's going to help the pallet stick to the 2x4s and keep the whole thing standing up because it was meant to load wood. Now, a pallet is huge. It is like 3 feet by 4 feet. And managing those and figuring out how to construct something like that was beyond anything I'd ever done in my life. I was really counting on a carpenter to show up. But because of a rain delay, he couldn't get on the freeway and he couldn't get to the location where I was. I was on a ranch working on that project. I said, oh no, good thing for Pinterest. I figured out from looking at a couple drawings and sketches that I would need certain kinds of lag bolts and I would need certain kinds of fasteners. And the ranch that I was on had tools available for me to cut the wood and to fasten it, but I had to come up with the design. And I had to do it basically by myself without someone else holding the other parts and pieces together while I did the assembly. It was Legos without instructions. It was the most incredibly fantastic kind of pressure cooker, get this thing done kind of a project I had ever did. When I finished, I had 3 shelves. They were solid. I even put the cross pieces in place so that it wouldn't like tip. I went, yay, for engineering classes that I still remembered. I couldn't believe that an hour after I finished it, I was just satisfyingly exhausted from the creative experience of having done that. It became a hallmark for me. Once I had accomplished that, I started to look at everything else in my life and said, I wonder what else I can change in the world around me. I'm creative enough to figure it out. I know how to ask for help. And that began this whole passion of mine to talk about creative confidence, and that it's inherent in us and that others can grasp it and get a hold of it. But now, I told you about some experiences that I had, but it's not because I learned those when I was in high school. It's because I had life experiences afterwards that really helped me figure out that I could do this kind of thing. I could be creative. So why is it that we don't teach creativity specifically in the typical high school curriculum? Well, in my story in high school, it was a seductive concept called STEM. I wanted to be an engineer, so I was tracked into the STEM and the college track courses, which led me away from art and into math and science, and I did really well. It was easy to believe that I was going to succeed at being an engineer because I was so successful in high school. Well, I didn't take any art classes in high school. I didn't have any creative experiences with that. That was all elementary school. And somehow I lost the whole sense of creativity while I was in high school. I go off to college and I'm a part of an engineering program, and I'm not passing calculus. I'm not passing physics classes. My morale is down. My confidence is sinking. What am I going to do? Fortunately, I had taken some art design classes. In those art design classes, I learned how to draw. I learned that I could sketch. I learned that I could visualize things that I could imagine in my mind, that I could hear and I can talk to people about. I learned how to make things. Literally. I was in a machine shop learning how to do milling machines and lathes. I was working with molten metal, making castings. It was the most thrilling experience in school I'd ever known because I was doing something. I was engaging my mind in my creative activities, and I was making things I could see immediately, immediate gratification. Gotta love that. But why don't we do that in school? You may know that in 2006, Sir Ken Robinson did one of the most popular TED Talks ever. It's called Do Schools Kill Creativity? And he offers the idea that we get educated out of our creativity, that the whole school system is designed to track us in a certain way that does not stimulate the value of creative expression. Then as we go into adulthood, we just carry that forward naturally. It's what we've been trained, it's what we know how to do. Our productive time as an adult becomes, what are we doing for work? What are we doing in our social life that enriches us, which typically isn't related to necessarily creative endeavors? Sometimes we just kind of let those go. Many of us will pick those up as hobbies, and that's wonderful. I know that Rushton has a wonderful hobby of photography, and he shares that with us through his Instagram posts from his travels around the world. And it's fantastic to see that he has that kind of creative talent and skill. And he was one of the exceptional teachers that I've ever met who can still introduce creativity into his curriculum. But that isn't true for all teachers. And right now, our education system is oriented towards, how do I get this high school student to become the kind of adult that's going to be productive in the workplace? Now, you know there's an irony in what I've just said, and I'm going to talk about that in just in a few more minutes. I'd like to say that, keeping creativity at the forefront would be really important, rather than casting it to the side or relegating it to art classes that only a few students get to take, because it really, really doesn't have to be that way. When teachers lead with creativity, then students have a great opportunity to follow. It's the teacher who needs to have a lot of creative confidence in order to inspire creative confidence in their students. Creativity is really a growth mindset, and it serves as a catalyst for those teachers to inspire engaging lessons for their learners, to foster that student's creativity and build up that creative confidence. It is through creative activities and that we develop that creative confidence. David and Tom Kelly said that creativity is a muscle. It's something that we need to exercise. That means repetitions, going through repetitions and practicing the very thing that we're trying to gain expertise at. In fact, the entire sports world is made up of the idea that athletes need to repeatedly do what they do, practicing drills in order to become great at their sport. To foster student creativity and to build that creative confidence, teachers can learn themselves and then find ways to integrate their own learning into their curriculum. There are various ways to do it, but they also need to recognize, what does it look like when a student is demonstrating creativity? What if it doesn't come with a grade, if it doesn't look like an A paper, it looks like something else, what is the something else? It tends to get a little amorphous at times, a little vague, a little abstract, and teachers are lost. How do I put a point value on this? Let's admit that creativity is a subjective dimension. It's hard to easily tag it with a data point, but it's so critical to what I consider to be everything we do in life stems from some amount of creativity that we apply to solving a problem. Teachers are in a position where they could really benefit from developing an understanding of what a creative student's cognitive process looks like. I've learned from my own 3 sons that their creative processes look much different than mine, sometimes to my dismay, but I have to give them credit for being clever or for thinking differently than I do. Now, creativity can be nurtured, and it really does take practice and putting the practice to a practical use. And this is where, once you've done this a few times, this is where creative activities and creative confidence begin to grow. So, how might teachers develop their creative confidence for STEM or any other particular discipline that they're involved in? I'm going to give 8 examples depicted here. Hopefully these will be good memory markers for you. So I had mentioned, look at image number 1. I had mentioned exercise is one way to do this. Well, why not do a creative activity or exercise for 10 minutes every day? Many of us will take meditation or prayer. We will do some other routine every day. Let's add a creative, stimulating exercise to that. And I will comment on a few of those in just a moment. Here's the power of what creative confidence can do when we start to practice it. That ginormous potential represented by helium balloons just begins to lift our ideas up and carries them off to places that only your imagination can go. And that's exactly what we want teachers to do for our students in the classroom, to let those students and their minds have imaginative wanderings. Here's a very simple idea. If you take a look at picture number 3, what do we got? Shiny pair of wingtips in cordovan color, stepping on leaves. Well, you might think of it that way, or you could say, this person chose the path less traveled. They chose the divergent path to take. Maybe it was just getting to the classroom by going around the backside of the building. Maybe it was driving home on a different route. It doesn't matter, because as soon as we make that change, as soon as we change our routine, we cause ourselves to pause and to think. We'll see new things. We see the environment differently, and our brain starts to think, what is that there for? Why is this happening? Oh, I never saw that before. Oh, I should come this way more often. And now we are not bypassing what we normally see as a routine, but rather we're being stimulated by something in the environment that really helps us to wonder. Take a look at the woman in picture number 4. She's got her arms crossed, just like the exercise we had done before. Can you imagine starting creative exercises with students every day to stimulate their thinking in that way? What about employees in a company? What if we had like a creativity rally before we did anything in the day? We want those endorphins released, because those endorphins really fire us up better than coffee. That's what we want happening. And if it has to start with folding your arms in the opposite direction just to get uncomfortable with life, do it. Put your socks on differently. Heck, put 2 different socks on. Don't make them match, change them up. That'll throw you off and everyone else who sees you. And that'll start some fun conversations too. Exercises you can do. Dive into puzzles, whether they're crossword puzzles or other kinds of word puzzles. Oh, better yet, pick puzzles and challenges like word problems, like math problems of the day that are from a domain of learning that is not your own. Take a look at number 6. We see a young group of students who just made something they've never made before. When was the last time you made something you've never made before? I bet it fired you up. When you look at the product at the end, just as these girls are doing, we're talking spaghetti sticks and marshmallows. But when used as a creative exercise, it's pretty awesome. David and Tom Kelly recommend this illustration in number 7. Let's call it 30 circles. What would you do with 30 circles? How about thumbnail sketches? How many thumbnail sketches could you generate in 10 minutes of time? Once you get past the basketball, the tennis ball, and the golf ball, and maybe the globe, you start to lose ideas about what could you draw in those. Imagine doing that every day. At some point, you'll get half of them filled with creative potential ideas, little thumbnail sketches. One other very important thing, the last thing that I show, is a question mark. That's asking why. When we engage our students in asking why questions, we begin to open the possibilities of learning in ways that we can't imagine, because that's really the student's imagination. And what is the benefit of all of this? Why go through this activity of generating creative confidence? Teachers have been teaching just fine for many years, just the way they always have been, and students have been learning. But maybe they could be learning better. Maybe it isn't just about, as my friend Rushton would say, good enough. Maybe there's something more. And it is that more that I believe creative confidence can lead us into. The way that I see this, and especially in STEM education, is it's really about a process. Creative confidence just is a foundation for creative processes and gives confidence to the person that they can do something. And even if it doesn't work well, there's a good chance for recovery, because the recovery is also a valuable part of the process. Creative confidence is a foundation of courage to try something innovative, believing that whether it works or not is secondary to the trying. And it can be practiced. Teachers can practice this with their students. You can practice this on your own. You could do it as a solo activity or exercise. In a classroom culture that's infused with creative confidence, I think the possibilities are endless. And there's lots of creative and amazing things that students will be able to do and show about their own cognitive structure that you may not get to, that many teachers don't get to, because it doesn't show up very well in a 5-paragraph essay or a 10-page report. Or, 4th grade, the mission project. Sometimes these assignments just need to be tossed out and allowing students to express their learning in new and in different ways. Before I leave this jubilation page, I did graduate with an art design degree. And my father asked me the question, "Son, what are you going to do with that?" Well, Dad, I graduated. And that was as good enough of an answer as I could give. I was a little disheartened that I couldn't be an engineer. There was just no way I was going to get through calculus and physics. But I got through. Determination. I didn't know at the time that I could have called it adaptive flexibility. I had rediscovered creative confidence. And that degree in art design has been beneficial to me in everything that I do, in every way that I think about life, how I think about interactions. My wardrobe is color matched. I've got shoes that correctly correspond. I sometimes can even dress to match the color of my presentations. And it just happens intuitively. Rushton knows. He was there. He was there when it happened. I used that art design degree to become an instructional designer. I finished a master's degree, and then I went on to earn a doctorate in a similar field called instructional systems. I went back to my dad, who fortunately was still alive at the time, and I said, "Dad, Do you remember when you asked me that question at graduation, what I was going to do with an art design degree? This is what I did. And now I can say, Dad, look what I'm doing. I have the opportunity to inspire teachers in the work that they do. And how valuable is that when they go into their classrooms and they get to work with a whole nother generation of students and teach them creativity and adaptive flexibility and creative thinking, because it's the creativity that we really need. We don't need more mathematicians or scientists. We need creative people who know what to do with the math and know what to do with the science. I don't think we got to the moon because the engineers had gone through a STEM curriculum when they were in high school in the 40s and 50s. I think there's other reasons we got there. They knew how to play. They knew how to build. They knew how to fail at something and come back from it. They knew resilience. And all of that is part of what creative confidence is about. I'm going to finish on this. It's only when we are willing to constantly expand and evaluate our own thinking will we be able to create the learning environments that our students need. And with that, I'll bring this to a close and turn this back to Rushton, and thank you so much for your time and your attention.
Very cool. Steve, thank you. I mean, an inspiring piece for sure. If you would go ahead and stop sharing the screen, I want to introduce everybody to one of our members who joined as well, Cecilia. Thank you for being part of this.
Thank you.
Cool. Hi, Cecilia.
Hi, Steve. How are you?
Hey, I'm having a great day hanging out here with you in Rushton.
Good.
So we have time for a couple of questions. I'll start. You very much focused on the idea of what teachers can do in order to unleash creative confidence in their students and in themselves. But this is not limited to educational environments by any means. I'm imagining that companies all over the place need, this kind of discussion about how to get the best out of their people, right?
Oh, absolutely. Because my heart has been in education for the last 20 years. It's easy for me to focus and lean in and gravitate that way. But absolutely, Rushton, the idea of creative confidence is just as important for the guy who runs the stockroom at Amazon, who has to figure out, how do I get these boxes down off a shelf that's 13 stories above my head? How do I keep everybody safe? To my son works at Taco Bell. The things that he has learned as a 17-year-old handling drive-through and various kinds of credit card transactions and crazy coupons, he has learned creative adaptability. Once he mastered what the basic content was, he found ways to become more effective because he saw problems. And he said, well, how do I solve this problem when the chefs are behind, or when the prep crew is moving too slow and the red light is flashing, and red lights inside of a Taco Bell is a bad sign that they're moving too slow. And that creates a sense of pressure. And in that pressure and discomfort, he finds ways to solve the problem. There is no work environment that I could even imagine that wouldn't benefit from creative exercises to stimulate how employees solve the routine problems of what they do in their job.
Very cool. I will note that one of the tenets of my life, I'd say, is just that one needs to be kind to everybody. Everybody's worthy of having people treat them with kindness. That said, man, do I make sure never to make the person in the drive-through window mad at me. I mean, that's
yes.
the last person.
Yes. Yeah.
Cecilia, how about you? Anything from the presentation you'd like to comment on or ask a question about?
Yes. Well, actually, I'm sorry I came in late. It was inadvertent. But anyway, I found this, what I heard of it, and I will, when it's posted, go back and watch the first half. Found it very interesting. There is another Rotary friend of mine in Livermore who was he was in the Air Force for many years, and he invented the dosimeter, which is every person that works in a nuclear facility has to wear a dosimeter.
Yes.
Which measures the accumulation of radiation in your system. And he's a really fascinating guy. But anyway, so that's, of course, very STEM oriented, and he started in the late 40s, early 50s when he was in the Air Force, and then ultimately moved into the atomic age. So he worked at Los Alamos and eventually Livermore. doing more of that type of sort of biophysics kind of work. So we would tend to think, since probably he learned in the same kind of environment in school that I had, which was you did everything by rote pretty much.
Yes.
Those days. So I think that he did not think he had much creativity of his own, but after he retired, he took up art. First watercolor painting, now colored pencil painting, and he wins awards with his artwork. And I'm a frustrated stick figure person. And I actually have the drawing pads and pencils and things like that, but can I get myself to sit down and start practicing that? No. I mean, I have very, very low creative confidence myself. And, I guess your slide with the 8, things that you can do to build creative confidence could be helpful for someone like me and others who feel like they don't have a creative bone in their body. I mean, I'm creative in many other ways, all of them kind of related to business, but in one way or another, but just not in the arts so much.
Cecilia, I really appreciate how you addressed creativity in an area outside of art. And yet, when you started thinking about creativity, you applied it to artistic kinds of endeavors. But creativity comes out in the way that we solve problems, in how we think about solving problems, in whatever domain of expertise we have. Our expertise in doing certain things draws out a mastery of tools or elements or a way of thinking that we creatively apply and maybe even just reflexively apply. So we're not consciously thinking, do I need to be creative here? No, I just need to get this job done. To someone outside that realm, your ability to get that job done looks like magic, because they don't have that skill. And then we often just take it for granted. Well, I just know how to do this. No, right. You're a really creative person.
Yeah. Well, and I know that, and levels that don't have to do with, artistic endeavors, drawing and painting. And I mean, there are many forms of artistic endeavor, but drawing, painting, and things like that, what I really think of as sort of real art.
Yes. Knowledge, it was an artist and studying art. And I was looking at some of his work at one point. I said, oh, that's just amazing. You've got such talent. He said, there are techniques. You learn to draw. You learn to draw this. You learn to draw that. And I was like, yeah, it's easy for you to say. And then had a chance to take an art class. I was like, oh, wow. That turns out you can learn to draw. He was right, And a thing to Google is sketchnoting, right?
Sketchnoting.
Yes, spelled sketch noting.
Sketchnoting.
Right? Or sketch note for that matter. But it's an interesting movement going on in education right now that really encourages people to think about taking notes in different ways, and often what they're doing is they're helping you learn to draw little things that can help become part of how you remember what you're being presented. And it's amazing how quickly people can develop a sense of, oh, I can do that. I had no idea. Wow, that's kind of fun.
True.
So Steve, I am going to wrap up the recording and then hand it over to you for a final comment to our viewers, our guests, and our members. But for everybody who has joined us, please let us know you were here. So there is an attendance survey item just a little bit farther down. Just let us know you were here. We love to connect with people. We're not going to spam you or anything like that, but it's good for us to know. And then there is a discussion session at the bottom in the discuss area. And please leave your thoughts on this program, on any element of the meeting you'd like, and you can even reply to other people's comments if you like. We love seeing discussions kick into gear there. So please leave your thoughts. With that, I'd like to hand it over to Steve for the final thought. As always, after we finish the recording, those of us who are on the recording get a chance to talk to these interesting people all the more. That's good fun. So please join in to do that. Whenever your next opportunity is. But Steve, go ahead and finish us off.
Cecilia and Rushton, I really appreciate the questions that you asked, which stimulated me to remember that creativity is a frame of mind. It is a choice that we make when we choose to believe that we are creative, and we take that on and we take ownership for it. It becomes a part of who we are. When we value that part, we begin to apply it in many different settings, in many different contexts that have nothing to do with the typical art or artsy kinds of crafts. Believing in the power of your ability to create and to be creative is the first step in developing creative confidence.
Very cool. Members and guests, thank you for taking in our meeting this week, and we look forward to seeing you next week.